It was just past 10 p.m. when I stepped through the sliding glass doors of Duluth International Airport, my breath fogging up in the chilly Minnesota air. The sun had long dipped below the horizon, leaving the tarmac bathed in artificial yellow light. The quiet hum of the fluorescent bulbs and the distant whine of a maintenance vehicle were the only sounds. Most people think of airports as always bustling, but during the graveyard shift, this place transforms into something eerie, hollow, even haunted. I had only recently taken this job. After being laid off from my last gig at a regional shipping depot, I was desperate for anything that paid, and the overnight security position seemed easy enough. The pay was better than expected, and the hours, though lonely, suited me. I didn't mind being alone. Or at least, I thought I didn't. The airport had a reputation among locals, whispered rumors about strange sightings and inexplicable noises after midnight. I chalked it up to urban legend, people's imaginations running wild in an otherwise boring city. That was until my first briefing. My supervisor, a tall, tight-lipped man named Carter, handed me a slim packet of rules on my first night. It wasn't a thick document, only one sheet of paper front and back, but it immediately struck me as odd. The rules were written plainly, but some were so unusual I couldn't help but laugh out loud. He didn't laugh with me. "I'm serious," he said, his eyes narrowing. "Don't break them. Don't question them. Don't try to understand them." I looked back at the sheet, reading aloud. 1. Never respond to any page over the intercom after 2:14 a.m. 2. If you see a woman in a red scarf standing by gate 5 after midnight, do not approach her. Do not make eye contact. 3. Between 3 and 3:17 a.m., avoid looking at any security monitor in Terminal B. 4. If you hear knocking from inside the luggage conveyor tunnels, ignore it. 5. Always greet the janitor on duty, even if you're sure you didn't see anyone clock in. 6. If you hear a flight landing between 2:30 and 4 a.m., report to the operations office immediately and lock the door behind you. 7. Never ask about Flight 237. That last one gave me chills. There wasn't even a Flight 237 scheduled here, not during my orientation or ever in the public flight records. Carter folded his arms and waited for me to acknowledge I understood. I nodded, mostly to get him off my back, but the unease settled into my chest like a cold stone. That first night was uneventful. I patrolled the gates, checked the empty baggage claims, peered out over the runways, and watched a snowplow clear the frozen tarmac. A janitor passed me once, and I gave him a nod. He didn't respond, but I assumed he just hadn't heard me through his earbuds. It wasn't until my third night that things began to feel off. At exactly 2:14 a.m., a static crackle echoed over the intercom. Then a voice, crackly and low, almost like it was underwater, called out, "Assistance needed at Gate 5. I froze, heart pounding in my chest. Gate 5. I remembered the rule. Never respond to any page over the intercom after 2:14 a.m. It was 2:14 on the dot. I stayed perfectly still. The voice repeated itself. "Assistance needed at Gate 5. Please respond." I backed away from my station in the security office, careful not to even glance toward the monitors. I made my way down the hall, away from Gate 5. I heard no footsteps, but felt like I was being watched. The kind of heavy, sinking awareness you get when someone is behind you. I didn't sleep well when I got home that morning. My dreams were full of static, muffled voices and the faint sound of dragging footsteps. I woke up with a nosebleed and a splitting headache. The following night, I was hesitant. I almost didn't clock in, but the fear of being jobless again pushed me forward. I reminded myself it had just been a coincidence. Maybe some janitor accidentally leaned on the intercom button. Maybe my brain was inventing the rest. But as midnight approached, that familiar hollow quiet returned, heavy and full of something unspoken. I did my rounds quickly, avoiding Gate 5 entirely. I didn't see the janitor that night, but I still greeted the empty hallway, just in case. At 2:30 a.m., I heard the unmistakable roar of jet engines. My body stiffened. There were no scheduled flights between 1 and 5:30 a.m. I checked the monitor despite myself. Nothing showed on radar, no landing registered, but I could hear it, the low rumble building into a loud whoosh as it passed overhead. I ran to the operations office, remembering Rule 6. I barely made it inside before the power flickered and dimmed. I slammed the door shut and locked it. For 10 minutes, I stood in the dark, pressed against the door, holding my breath. A cold wind seemed to blow beneath the crack, though the room had no windows or vents connected to the outside. Then silence. I unlocked the door slowly and stepped out. Everything looked normal. Lights on, halls quiet, no plane, no people, but the air smelled faintly of fuel, like after a fresh landing. And in the middle of the concourse was a single, unclaimed suitcase. Black, leather, old-fashioned. It hadn't been there before. I called Carter that morning. He didn't answer. Instead, I got a text. Good, you followed the rules. Don't touch the case. Janitor will take care of it. When I returned that night, the suitcase was gone. I asked the janitor, an older man with a hunched back and thick glasses, if he'd taken care of the suitcase. He stared at me for a long moment before replying, "Which suitcase?" Then he smiled, not kindly, not at all. By the end of the week, I noticed other strange things. A child's laughter coming from the restroom stalls around 1 a.m. A man in a pilot's uniform walking into the closed-off hangar, never coming out. Gate 3's automatic doors opening and closing rhythmically, even though there was no wind or movement nearby. And once, while sitting in the break room sipping coffee, I caught a glimpse of a woman through the reflection in the microwave. She wore a red scarf and stood still as a statue, watching me from Gate 5's direction. When I turned around, no one was there. I wanted to quit. Every fiber of me screamed to leave that place and never return. But something strange had taken hold, a mixture of curiosity and dread, a terrible need to understand the rules and what happens when they're broken. So I stayed. At least for now. I kept the rules in my pocket. I memorized them. I followed every single one. But the list wasn't complete. A few nights later, a new rule was taped to my locker in a plain envelope. It wasn't typed. It was handwritten in shaky, blue ink. 8. Do not talk to the passengers of Flight 237. No matter what they say, do not let them follow you. There is no Flight 237 on any schedule. There never has been. But now I check the arrival board every night, just in case. I walked into the security office on my 5th night with a tight chest and a head full of static. The envelope with the new rule had shaken me. I didn't know who had written it or when it was left. I had checked the security footage of the locker hallway from the night before. There was nothing. No one showed up on the screen. One minute the envelope wasn't there, the next minute it was. That's when I realized something important. Whatever was happening at this airport, it wasn't confined to the cameras or schedules or the physical boundaries of the terminal. It could hide from the lenses. It could rewrite reality or slip between it. The night began like any other. The clock struck 11 p.m. and I walked my usual patrol route, flashlight in hand. The concourse was dim, sterile, and silent. My boots echoed against the marble floor. At exactly 12:03 a.m., I saw her again. The woman in the red scarf. She stood near Gate 5, unmoving, her back turned to me this time. The scarf was long and frayed at the edges, swaying slightly, even though there was no draft. My stomach clenched. I didn't look too long. I turned my head, walked the other direction, and kept going until I reached the vending machines by Terminal B. I didn't hear footsteps behind me, but I still knew she had vanished. At 1 a.m., I returned to the security office. Nothing had triggered the alarms. Nothing visible was out of place. Still, a deep unease had settled in my spine. I sat down and checked the monitors. As instructed by Rule Number 3, I avoided looking at any Terminal B cameras between 3 and 3:17 a.m. But it wasn't 3 yet. Everything was quiet until 2:27 a.m. That's when the overhead intercom beeped to life. Attention! Flight 237 has arrived. Please proceed to Gate 4 for disembarkation. I froze. Flight 237. It wasn't on the schedule. It never had been. And Gate 4 was supposed to be under maintenance. No flights had landed there for over 6 months. I grabbed my phone and checked the flight logs. Nothing. But when I switched to the external tarmac cam, the one pointed at Gate 4's jet bridge, my breath caught. There was a plane there. Its lights were dim, no airline logo on the fuselage. The aircraft was matte gray and larger than most commercial jets. The ramp was down, the door open, and passengers were starting to exit. Dozens of them. They moved slowly in a neat line, like they were sleepwalking. I zoomed in. Their faces were pale, expressionless. Every single one of them looked wrong. Their movements were slightly delayed like puppets on invisible strings. Their eyes didn't blink. A few had bloodshot sclera, others had mouths that didn't quite close, like they were trying to smile but had forgotten how. I shut off the monitor. Rule number 8 flashed through my mind like a siren. Do not talk to the passengers of Flight 237. No matter what they say, do not let them follow you. I got up, heart pounding, and grabbed the door handle. But I never opened it. 3 slow knocks echoed through the metal door. I backed away. The knocks came again, more insistent this time. Then came the voice. Hey, I think we're lost. Can you help us find baggage claim? The voice sounded human. Male. But there was something off about the tone. It was too smooth, too calm, like it was mimicking friendliness, a rehearsal of normalcy by something unfamiliar with it. I said nothing. We don't know where to go, came another voice, this one higher. Female, soft but echoing, like she was speaking into a deep cave. It's cold out here. The door handle rattled. I moved back to the desk and activated the lockdown procedure. As soon as the mechanism clicked and the red light came on, the voices stopped. Complete silence. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. I checked the hallway through the security feed, empty. No passengers, no shadows, no plane outside Gate 4. When I returned to the Gate 4 camera, the aircraft was gone. Not taxiing, not deboarding, just gone. Like it had never been there. But something had changed. At 3:05 a.m., I realized my mistake. In the chaos, I forgot the third rule. Avoid looking at the monitors for Terminal B between 3 and 3:17 a.m. I had just checked Terminal B at 3:04. At first, nothing happened. But then the monitors began to glitch. The image began to warp. The feed twisted into a black spiral, flickering in and out. Then the camera zoomed in on its own, pushing deeper and deeper into darkness, even though there was nothing in view. And then something looked back. 2 glowing eyes, not human. No eyelids, no pupils, just light. They blinked once, horizontally, not vertically, and then the screen went black. I sat frozen, my fingers gripping the edge of the desk. The air grew heavy. My ears began to ring. Something crawled through the walls of the terminal. I couldn't hear it directly, but I felt it, like invisible static brushing against my skin. I turned off all the monitors. No rule had ever told me to do that, but I had to. The ringing stopped. That was the worst part. Silence returning like a breath held too long. I stayed there, lights off, watching the locked door, until dawn began to filter through the airport windows. When Carter came in at 7 a.m., he didn't ask questions. He placed a coffee cup on my desk and said one thing. You saw them, didn't you? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. He pulled a small laminated card from his coat and placed it on the desk. It was labeled Supplemental Rule Sheet. 4 new rules were listed. 9. Flight 237 cannot be tracked. Do not attempt to trace its origin or destination. 10. Do not photograph or record anything between 2:30 and 4 a.m. 11. If a passenger from Flight 237 speaks your name, do not respond. 12. Do not fall asleep in the airport. He gave me a long, tired look before he turned to leave. They remember faces, he said over his shoulder. Now that they've seen yours, you can't miss a single rule. Not even once. That night, I watched every shadow twice. I didn't blink unless I had to, but deep in my chest, I felt it. This wasn't just a strange airport. It was something older than that. A crossing point, a gateway. And Flight 237 wasn't the only one coming. The next few nights passed in a state of hyper-awareness. Every sound felt amplified. Every flicker of the overhead lights felt like a warning. I memorized the supplemental rules just as religiously as the first list. The moment 2:14 a.m. arrived, I unplugged the intercom system. At 2:30, I locked myself in the operations office, avoiding every hallway and camera feed. I wouldn't look at Gate 4. I wouldn't acknowledge Gate 5. I wouldn't even breathe too loud between 3 and 3:17 a.m. But even with all that caution, the airport had a way of drawing you in, of pulling your attention to places you weren't supposed to see. It started with a paper airplane. I found it lying perfectly folded on the floor outside the security office at 1:12 a.m. Crisp white paper, creased with unnatural precision. It hadn't been there during my last patrol. On the wing, written in shaky pencil, Seat 12A. There was no flight number, no name, just that. I looked around. No footsteps, no movement, no sound, but the buzz of fluorescent lights. I picked it up carefully, holding it like it might burn me. It felt warm. When I unfolded it, I expected a blank sheet. Instead, I found a message written in the same thin, frantic handwriting. He keeps looking at me. I can't blink. Every time I do, he gets closer. Seat 12A, please help me. Don't let him follow me off the plane. I dropped the note. My pulse throbbed in my ears. I didn't want to know more, but I also knew this was the airport's way of testing me. It wanted to see if I'd follow curiosity or follow the rules. I returned to the security office and tried to ignore it. At 1:42 a.m., the intercom crackled on again, even though I had unplugged it hours ago. Passenger assistance requested at gate 4, seat 12A. That was not possible. I stared at the unplugged cord. The voice wasn't the usual flat, mechanical tone. It was softer now, human, like someone whispering into the speaker through clenched teeth. Please help me. He won't stop smiling. I stood up slowly. My legs moved on their own, betraying everything in my mind screaming no. I didn't go to gate 4. Instead, I pulled up the gate 4 camera feed and watched. A plane was there. Again, identical to the last one, matte gray, unmarked. And this time, only one person stepped off. A man. He wore a pilot's uniform, but his cap was too small for his head, resting awkwardly atop his long, misshapen skull. His arms hung loosely by his sides, fingers too long, too stiff. His eyes, dead and glassy, stared ahead unblinking, and he was smiling. Not pleasantly, not warmly. His lips were stretched into a grin so wide I thought the skin might tear. There were too many teeth. I switched off the monitor, shaking. Rule number 11 echoed in my head. If a passenger from Flight 237 speaks your name, do not respond. I sat back down, trying to breathe. And then from behind me I heard the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming down the hallway outside the security room. I reached for my radio and pressed the emergency channel. No static, no connection. The lights flickered above me. Then silence. A knock. 3 times on the glass window beside the security office door. I didn't look. I couldn't. My body went stiff, my eyes glued to the floor. My heart thundered in my chest like it was trying to escape. Then a voice, from inches behind the glass. Hey, is that you, Alex? That was my name. No one here knew it. I'd never told anyone. Not Carter, not the janitor. My ID badge didn't even have my first name, just A. Reeves. It's me, from seat 12A. I just need a minute. I just want to talk. His tone was light, almost friendly, but it was wrong, like a voice mimicking human behavior running a broken program. A second later, the voice deepened, warped, and began to stutter. I just want to talk. Talk. I covered my ears, then silence. When I finally looked up, the hallway was empty again. I stayed locked inside the office until the sun rose. When Carter arrived, I didn't wait for him to speak. I just handed him the paper airplane. He looked at it for a long time, then sighed and nodded like he'd expected it all along. That's the man in seat 12A, he said. He sat across from me and opened his thermos of coffee. His hands trembled slightly as he poured a cup and handed it to me. Some say he's not from the flight, that he was already on board before the plane existed, that he's older. I said nothing. My fingers tightened around the cup. Carter continued. No one has ever seen who he's sitting next to or where he gets on, but the seat's always filled, and he always steps off. I leaned back, trying to keep the shakiness out of my voice. Why me? Carter stared at the dark coffee in his cup, his face hollow. He likes the curious ones, the ones who hesitate. Then he stood and walked toward the terminal. Before he left, he turned and said something that chilled me more than anything else I'd heard. You should burn that note. That night, I brought a lighter. I took the paper airplane into the maintenance closet near the boiler room and set it ablaze over a metal trash can. It didn't burn like normal paper. It curled and twisted, releasing a thick black smoke that smelled like jet fuel and something rotten. The fire left no ashes, just a scorched message at the bottom of the can. He's already inside. I slammed the lid shut and ran back to the security office. I didn't sleep the next day. I didn't eat. I just lay in my apartment with every light on, staring at the ceiling. Because now I knew something terrible. The man in seat 12A wasn't just a passenger. He was looking for a replacement. I returned to the airport that night with a gnawing sense of dread. Every step I took toward the sliding glass entrance felt heavier, like gravity itself was resisting me. The fluorescent glow from inside flickered with an unnatural rhythm, as if the building itself were holding its breath. I hadn't told anyone what happened with the note. Not that anyone would believe me, but Carter knew. He always knew. And tonight, when I stepped into the security office, I found no coffee waiting, no Carter, no supplemental rules, just silence. The monitors were already on, and on every screen, every single camera feed was the same thing. A still frame. Seat 12A. The image was grainy, like old VHS tape. The man was sitting perfectly still in the plane's window seat, his eyes locked onto the lens of the camera, or maybe onto me. His grin was wider now, more teeth than before. I slammed the power button. The screens refused to shut off. Then the lights went out. Not just the office, the entire airport. A pop echoed through the halls as the backup generator failed to kick in. For the first time since I started this job, the terminal was plunged into pure darkness. I reached for my flashlight. It flickered twice before stabilizing. The narrow beam of light illuminated only a few feet in front of me. The air was suddenly freezing, my breath visible in shaky clouds. Then I heard it, the dragging sound, like something long and heavy being pulled across tile. I pointed the flashlight toward the hallway, empty, but the sound continued, closer, then farther, then suddenly right behind me. I spun around. Nothing. I locked the office door and backed away from the glass. For several minutes, I just stood there listening. That's when the intercom crackled back to life, even in the blackout. "Alex, come meet your flight." It was his voice again. Calm, playful, wrong. Then a sound that chilled me to my bones. A boarding chime. A real one, as if a flight was preparing to depart. I looked out the window toward the terminal, and through the darkness I saw Gate 6's boarding lights flash on. Gate 6 wasn't supposed to be operational. I checked the flight logs manually. Flight 237. Departure, 3 a.m. Destination, unknown. Passenger list, one name. Alex Reeves. I backed away from the monitor and fell into my chair. There it was. My name. The final trap. The airport wasn't just a place where things arrived. It was also a place where things left. And I was now on the manifest. Suddenly, the door handle rattled violently. A shadow passed by the window. No footsteps, no breath, just movement. Then came the knocking. 5 times. Not 3. Not like before. This wasn't a test. It was an invitation. I pressed my back against the far wall and stared at the door. I couldn't run. I couldn't hide. I remembered Carter's warning. Don't miss a single rule. Not even once. So I did something desperate. I pulled out the original list of rules and began reading them aloud. Word for word. Line by line. Like a prayer. The knocking stopped. A second later, the emergency lights buzzed on, casting a dim red glow through the halls. And outside the door, I saw something I'll never forget. A man, tall, thin, with that same grotesque grin, dragging a carry-on bag behind him. His skin was gray, waxy, like a mannequin left out in the sun. He walked down the hallway toward Gate 6. Behind him, more passengers followed, silent, soulless, shuffling. Some were missing limbs, some looked burned, some looked like people I used to know. One turned its head and locked eyes with me. It was my father, but my father had died 5 years ago. I squeezed my eyes shut and whispered the rules again. When I opened them, the hallway was empty. No passengers, no dragging sounds. But the boarding lights at Gate 6 were still on. I checked the camera feed. The plane was gone. Flight 237 had departed. Without me. For now. That morning, Carter returned. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked older, tired. "You almost boarded," he said quietly. I nodded. He pulled something out of his coat pocket and placed it on the desk. It was my airport ID badge, burned around the edges. The photo half melted. I found this outside Gate 6. I stared at it, unable to speak. Then Carter placed something else on the desk. A new sheet of paper. Handwritten in that same shaky ink. Additional rules, 13. If the lights go out and the intercom calls your name, do not follow the sound. 14. If a version of you boards the plane, don't try to stop it. 15. If Flight 237 lists you as a passenger, you have until sunrise to remove your name. 16. The flight always returns for who it missed. I looked up at Carter, my hands trembling. How do I remove my name? He didn't answer. He just said, "Make it through tonight. One more night." Then he left. And for the first time since I started working the night shift at Duluth Airport, I realized something terrifying. I was no longer just a night guard. I was part of the airport now, and Flight 237 was still watching me. I didn't know how much longer I could hold on to my sanity. Each night felt like a slow descent into something worse. The rules, the whispers, the things I'd seen, they were no longer just warnings. They were my new reality, pressing in from all sides, tightening like a vice. Every time the clock struck 2:14 a.m., every time the intercom crackled, I felt my skin crawl. But tonight felt different. I had memorized the additional rules that Carter gave me. I repeated them like a mantra, trying to believe, trying to survive. I checked the clocks. I checked the cameras. I made sure to keep my distance from the darker corners of the airport, especially near Gate 6. The planes that landed after midnight, they weren't really planes. They were something else entirely, something that fed on those who strayed too far from the rules. At 1:45 a.m., I was patrolling the back hallways near the runways when I noticed something strange. A single figure standing near the edge of the tarmac where the planes usually lined up. No aircraft had been scheduled to depart at this time, and the area had been empty for hours. It was so quiet I could hear the distant hum of the power lines, but the figure remained still, staring into the void of the runway. I froze. It was a man, tall, thin, like the others I'd seen before. His clothes were torn, ragged, but it wasn't the man that made my blood run cold. It was his eyes. They were hollow, completely dark, like pits drawing me in. I was about to move when I saw something even more unsettling, a plane. It wasn't like the others. It didn't match any aircraft I knew. No logo, no lights, just a shadow on the runway, its engines off, as though it had been there for ages, waiting. The man didn't move. He didn't acknowledge me, but I felt his gaze on me, even from a distance. Something tugged at the back of my mind, some feeling I couldn't place, a sense of urgency. Rule number 13. If the lights go out and the intercom calls your name, do not follow the sound. The warning flashed in my mind like a neon sign. I knew what I had to do. I had to stay away from Gate 6, stay away from the runway. But I didn't listen. I couldn't. My legs moved on their own. I crossed the hall. My flashlight flickered. I reached the door to the tarmac, and then I saw it. On the far side of the plane, just beyond the wings, was a figure standing at the entrance of the plane. Another passenger. But this one was different. His face wasn't a face anymore. His features were stretched and blurred, like he was made of smoke. His eyes, those dark, hollow eyes, were fixed directly on me. And just as I reached for the door handle, the figure lifted a hand, beckoning me forward. I couldn't stop myself. I opened the door. As soon as my foot touched the tarmac, the world seemed to shift. The air around me felt heavy, as if I were walking through a different layer of reality. The hum of the lights was replaced with a low, guttural growl coming from somewhere deep inside the plane. The ground beneath my feet seemed to vibrate with an ancient energy. I stepped forward, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Rule number 14. If a version of you boards the plane, don't try to stop it. I stopped in my tracks. I hadn't even realized it until now, but the man in the doorway, his face was mine, a twisted version of me. But it wasn't just the appearance. It was the way he moved, the way he looked at me. There was nothing human in those eyes. The corners of his mouth curled upward in a grin that seemed wrong, twisted, like he had learned how to smile but had forgotten what it meant. "You're late," he said, his voice gravelly, like the words had been forced out through cracked lips. "Come aboard. We've been waiting." I turned and ran, but my legs felt like lead, and every step I took brought me closer to the plane, closer to that thing, that version of me. My skin crawled with the feeling of being pursued, even though there was no one behind me. I reached the door to the security office, but it didn't open. It wouldn't open. The handle wouldn't turn. The door was stuck, solid. I turned around. The plane was closer. I had to go inside. I had to stop it. I had to run before it was too late. I ran back into the terminal, my breath ragged and shallow. The lights flickered again, then went out. The air became thick with static. The world seemed to stretch, like I was running through an old film reel, the edges of my vision becoming distorted. Then the voice came again. "Alex, you're not leaving. We're all waiting." I slammed my hands against the walls, desperate to find the exit. But everything was wrong. Every hallway twisted back into itself. Every door was green, but my throat was dry. The only sound in the air was the low, terrible hum of something ancient. The runway was in front of me, the plane, the passengers, the version of me waiting at the door, and the intercom. It crackled again. "Alex Reeves, you belong with us." I turned, but there was no escape. And then, as if on cue, I felt it. Something had changed. The temperature had dropped and the lights came back on, blindingly bright. The passengers were gone. The plane was gone. I was standing in the middle of the terminal, alone. For a moment I thought I had escaped, but then I looked at the monitor, and there on the screen was the image of the man in the doorway, the twisted, smiling version of me, sitting in seat 12A. The intercom clicked on once more. "We're still waiting." I had stayed too long. I had crossed the line. Flight 237 wasn't over. It was just beginning. And this time I wasn't running away. I was already aboard. I didn't sleep after that shift. I didn't even leave the airport. There was no point. I tried. I stood outside the front entrance, duffel bag in hand, the sunrise bleeding pink and orange through the sky. But when I stepped forward, when I tried to cross the threshold and leave the airport grounds, I found myself walking right back in through the rear maintenance hall. Over and over, 3 times. I even dropped my keys outside the sliding glass doors, hoping that if I broke the loop, the curse would snap. When I re-entered the building from the hangar side, my keys were already sitting on my desk. It had me, whatever it was. Carter didn't show up that morning. For the first time since I started this job, the office stayed quiet after 7 a.m. No new rules, no nod of approval, no thermos of burnt coffee, just the soft hum of monitors and the ticking of the analog clock on the wall. I was alone, but not really. I could feel it. It was inside the building with me now, watching, waiting. And then at 12:12 p.m., a time I'd never feared before, the announcement system flickered to life. Final boarding call for Flight 237, Gate 6, passenger Alex Reeves. My name echoed through the empty terminal like a funeral bell. The voice was no longer distorted. It was clear now, calm, familiar. It was my voice. I stood frozen for a long time before I made my way to the window overlooking Gate 6. The plane was there again, that same matte gray aircraft with no markings, its windows black and opaque. This time the ramp was down before I even arrived. The door was open, no passengers, just one figure standing inside the hatchway, obscured by shadow. Me, but not me, not anymore. The other Alex was taller now, the grin wider, skin pale like wax melting in slow motion. He extended a hand, the same way he had before, and for the first time he spoke loud enough that I could hear him without the intercom. "You can't delay forever," he said. "You were always part of this flight." My fingers twitched. Every instinct screamed to run, but my legs moved forward. Gate 6 opened without a sound. The ramp creaked beneath my boots as I stepped closer, my breath fogging in the suddenly freezing air. Rule number 15. If Flight 237 lists you as a passenger, you have until sunrise to remove your name. I had failed. The sun had already risen. The deadline was gone. I was out of time. I stood at the threshold of the plane, looking at myself. His hands still extended. Those eyes, soulless mirrors, reflected something hollow in me I hadn't acknowledged until now. "You're not real," I whispered. "Neither are you," he replied, smiling. "Not anymore." That's when the lights inside the plane flickered on for the first time, and I saw the passengers, rows of them, hundreds, all facing forward, all unmoving, all wearing my face. They weren't twisted anymore. They weren't monsters. They were just me, emotionless, hollow, still. Some wore my old uniforms, some wore hospital gowns, some wore a version of me that had aged 50 years, but none of them blinked. Not one. I stumbled back, but the ramp didn't let me go. It curled slightly under my boots, keeping me balanced, trapping me. The figure at the hatch tilted its head. "You boarded the moment you started asking questions," he said. "No. I followed the rules." "Yes, but the rules don't save you," he hissed. "They just delay your turn." Suddenly, all the cabin lights turned off again. Silence. The shadow version of me took one slow step forward. His hand brushed my shoulder. And in that instant, I remembered everything. Flashes. Fractured memories. Not mine. Others. Other guards. Other Alexes. All of them reliving the same nights, the same rules. Over and over. Some had broken them. Some had followed them to the letter. All had ended up here. I pulled away violently, gasping for air. No, I whispered. I'm not staying. I'm not becoming one of you. The figure sneered. You already are. Then he lunged. I don't remember how long we fought, if you can even call it a fight. It was like wrestling with a fog made of mirrors and broken memories. Every blow I landed felt like it bounced back on me. Every time I tried to run, I ended up in another row of seats, another aisle of versions of myself. Until I heard a voice. Carter's. You have to write your own rule before it consumes you. That's the only way out. I didn't understand at first, but then it clicked. The rules weren't laws. They were warnings. Stories. And stories could change if you had the will to write them. I reached into my coat pocket. My hand closed around the pen I didn't remember putting there. In my other pocket was a crumpled notepad from the security desk. I opened it with trembling fingers and wrote, Rule 17. If Flight 237 calls your name, you may still refuse, but only once. As soon as the pen scratched the final word, everything froze. The shadow version of me stopped mid-step, his mouth stuck open in a grotesque smile. The plane lights shattered all at once, plunging the cabin into darkness. And then the ramp released. I fell backward, landing hard on the cold tile of Gate 6. The plane was gone. The air was warm. The sun had risen again. And this time I wasn't trapped. I stood slowly, still shaking, my ears ringing. Behind me, the intercom buzzed once, then went silent. For good. That morning, Carter returned. No smile, no explanation. He just handed me a new sheet of paper. Current airport rules updated. 1 to 16, unchanged. 17. If Flight 237 calls your name, you may still refuse, but only once. He nodded toward the exit. You're free to go, Alex. And this time, I could. As I stepped through the sliding doors into the morning light, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Warmth. The sky was blue. The breeze was real. I didn't look back. I never went near Duluth Airport again, but some nights, when it's quiet, when the wind is just right, I still hear it. A boarding chime. A final call. And a voice that sounds like mine whispering through the static. Passenger Alex Reeves, final boarding now. But I don't answer. Not anymore.